Hi guys, I wanted to make this video of ancient civilizations of the Inner Sea so that you guys could learn how to play it. I wanted to do a kind of a quick down and dirty rules. There's some other specifics, but the game is actually fairly straightforward and not that difficult. It comes with this great player aid that everyone gets that basically has almost all the rules laid out, and you can just kind of follow along as we play. It's very like everyone goes on, like one person goes in the growth phase and then everyone else does that, and then you do a card phase, a competition phase, and a reckoning phase, and then there's steps within that. I'm not sure how long the game will take, so I have a suggestion for when we play, which is just like end at a certain time, or like say like 10 o'clock hits, that's the final epoch, no matter what epoch we're in. The game usually takes 4 epochs, but again, if the game runs long, we'll just end it then. So we can make that at the start. All right, so what I want to do is show you guys the big board. It's quite long. We'll probably use it if we're playing with 4 people. I set up just for the 2-player game there, and then those are just discs that I threw on the board for easy reach. But this is how the game starts for 2-player in one of the scenarios, the basic setup. Down here is the victory track. That is what you're trying to do, is get victory points. And then over here is the turn order, and which is right there, and then it shows you what epoch and what turn you're in within the epoch. An epoch is kind of a general term for a large amount of time, or like a big change in some major change in human history. Maybe you could argue that the invent of the internet was an epoch change for what the time we're living in. So basically, every civilization has its own special features. So this is Egypt, and everyone's going to pick a civilization of the 4 that are in the game, and it has different abilities for a civilization, which you can look at more closely when you actually play. It has a treasury box, a loot box, a ready box, and then what your special ability is that civilization. You have starting places on the board, so and then Troy is up there, and then this is their card, but I'm not going to get into all that stuff too much. We'll just let you read it. The game comes with event or cards, and there are 5 different types, and I'll get into that in a second. So I'll start with basically the game starts with the growth phase, and each civilization in turn order performs the following steps. You can retire discs. See if I can get that zoom better. You can retire discs and basically remove them from the board. You have a finite supply of discs that represent a lot of different things. They represent basically population, would be the best way to describe it. But they can also represent like culture and military and that sort of thing. But they represent, those kind of things. So what you do is you start by doing the growth phase. So at the beginning, you're not going to retire guys, but you might want to do it later on if like you're competing with somebody and you don't want them to attack your city and get loot. You might take one of those discs out and basically run away a bit and use it for something, put it back in your supply to move it to somewhere else in the game as you run out of discs. So those are always options. So then the next step is the acquisition step, and you get 1 disc for every settlement, 1 disc for every 2 shallow seas you control, 1 disc for each opposing civilization you're adjacent to, and discs from wonders and civilizations. Wonders are over here. I won't get into these too much as far as what they do. You can read them when we play. So that's all on this. So it's pretty easy. It's straightforward. So basically, long story short, Egypt is going to get 6. Okay, I won't go into the details on how, but it does following those steps. So then what you do is you can make them place them on the board, and I'll start by saying 1 disc is a camp on land. It's a camp. If you have like 1 here, it's a camp. 2 is a settlement, and if you put 3 in an area, it's a city. Cities get you victory points. Settlements get you more discs. So it's that trade-off, and then camps just kind of put you in a spot. So starting off, Egypt's going to want to do put itself as some cities, and maybe it wants to expand. One way it does that is by doing any space that's adjacent to it. So this sea space is adjacent. You can never go in here until the 4th epoch. That's the deep sea. We just don't have the technology to do it yet. So you expand, and you can chain them, so they don't have to be like adjacent when you start. You can. I put that one in Tyree, I think, and then I can go up to here. And the Phoenicians are not a player, so I can place it there. And I could do that too, and heck, I could even put a settlement up there. I probably wouldn't want to do that, but I can. So those are different options. Troy would do the same thing on its turn with its discs, and after I'm all done, it goes in turn order. You do that until you're done. You deploy them into, you resettle them, and then you do deployments. So then we go to the card phase. So that's the growth phase. Pretty simple. You just kind of place discs on. You put them into you put on cities. You can never go more than, well, you can go more than 3, but it won't count as more than a city. Now you're kind of talking as an army when you're in competition. I'll get into that in a second. So card phase. Let me show you the 5 different kind of cards. There's ones that play immediately. That's what that I is for. I feel like an old man who's trying to figure out your prescription with this. No, that's not good. All right, well, it's not going to read very well. But the I is for, it plays immediately. There are just phase cards that you can play at any when it's your turn. There are event cards, which also get played immediately, but then get replaced by another card in the fate deck. And that's this big stack of cards. There's this N negate cards, which actually negate when someone plays a card against you. It negates that card, so can be pretty useful in your hand. And then there's these C combat cards, which are used when there's competition, or competition cards technically. They don't call it combat because it's representing not just like military, but it also could represent like clashing cultures or religions or some other facet. Basically, you're competing for an area. It doesn't have to be militarily. The cards kind of depend. You know, this one looks like it's a military. I haven't read it, but it looks like it's a military. But there's others that are not. But it's basically C stands for competition. So the card phase works like this. You play a fate card in your turn, and you can either play a fate card or build a wonder or pass. Those are the 3 things you can do. So if you played a fate card, like let's say I went and I play this and I place, it says place 1 disc into 4 different areas and then gain 1 talent. So I could put discs into 4 different areas anywhere on the board. It doesn't have, this is where the rule of adjacent doesn't apply. So I could put one, here, I could put one up, next door, up there to Troy. I could put them anywhere. And then I gain a talent, and talents are kind of an abstract way of like saying money, or like a specialist of some kind, an engineer, a philosopher, blah, blah, blah. In this case, the philosopher king, great person, you'd say, that's a person, and he goes in my card under the treasury box, and I can use that for different things, which I'll get into. So you play those cards, and you do that until you either can't play any more cards or you just pass. And someone could negate this card if they didn't want me to play it, but since I'm not impacting somebody else, no one probably would. You cannot play combat cards at this step, so that's the one. And then event cards are always played when they're drawn. The other thing is building a wonder. The player aid doesn't really explain this one too well, but you can do that once per round, or once per turn, I guess, not round, because you keep doing this until everyone passes. Everyone can play cards until they pass. So we all just keep taking turns until we've all run out of cards and passed, or just decided to pass. But building a wonder, there are these wonders, and you build them. And you have to do it by you have to get rid of 5 different things, or 5 different kind of resources or discs or whatever. And 2 of them have to be from your guys. 2 of them are discs, okay? Then the other 3 can be 3 more discs. They can be cards in your hand. They can be talents that you have in your treasury. Any combination of those things you want. So just 2 of them have to be kind of workers or whatever that are helping build it. And then 3 others can be any combination of cards, talents, or more workers. And then when you build a wonder, you can place it anywhere that you control. And control means like only your color discs. So let's say I put the Great Pyramid in Egypt. Oh, that's a surprise. And then get the wonder, and then the wonder has a special ability from then on until it's captured or buried. And I'd have to look into what the rule buried means later, but because I forgot now. But you basically get something in it. This one, at the beginning of the, I have to pronounce this word right. Man, that's just not coming into focus there. Aeneas, looks like anus. At the beginning of the Aeneas step, you may return a disc to supply. If you do, gain 1 talent. You then may choose to swap turn order positions with an opposing civilization. So that's later in the round. You can use your wonder, and that effect happens as soon as you build it. That wonder is now available to be used. So that's the card phase. Then you go to the third step, which is the competition phase. And for this, I'm going to move some discs around. Let's say it's later in the game, and Troy's got somebody up there, and he goes across the Strait of Mina, and now he's got, say, 4 more discs he can place. So he's going to be like, you know what? I really want Alamina. So I'm going to put 4 discs up there. I really want it. So I'm going to use that now, and now we have competition. And what competition means is if you have 2 or more different civilizations in the same space with one of them having more than 1 disc. So that's a mouthful, but basically what it means is if I did this is not competition. This is just trading camps, going back and forth in the same area saying, hi, how you doing? I've got goods, you've got goods. Let's trade those goods. Hooray, like we're okay. But now if I want to build a settlement in there and not just a camp, okay, now we're in competition because now you're encroaching on my turf. I want to be making farms and, raising livestock and whatever, and now you're coming and taking my space up. Whereas before, we're just passing through. So now we've got competition. So actually, let's just leave this an example. So competition is a bit confusing, but basically what's going to happen is the civilization that has less, I'll just start by going through it. So you play cards face down on the table. So each person decides what competition cards, if any, they want to play and puts them face down on the table. And then you announce if you want to use a special ability on the civilization display and or a wonder. So I'd say like, hey, Troy's got a special ability. When I'm during competition, I actually can use this white disc as an ally with my guys. So I place a white disc down there, and that's what happens then. So then what we do is we reveal all the competition cards, and now negation cards can be played. So you can say, oh no, I don't like your competition card. I'm going to negate that one. And then in turn order, you all announce wonders go, all announce special abilities go. That's when I play that white disc. And then all played competition cards that were not negated play. Then we go to the base kind of the attack, or I'm going to call it attack. And what happens is you remove the civilization with less starts first, and they remove one of their discs. Or if they don't want to do that, they can play treasury. Let's see, where was this? I'm trying to find where this was. So I make sure I get it right. Sorry, guys. All right. Well, I don't remember. I don't find it exactly, but I'm pretty sure I got this right. And that is, you can use treasury to pay that instead of removing a disc. You can discard a card instead of removing a disc, or you can remove a disc. So let's just say that Egypt didn't have any cards and had no treasury, no talents, officially what they're called. So Egypt removes the disc. Okay. Now we go to, there's still discs in there. Now it is Troy's turn. And Troy, let's say they do have cards, but they don't want to discard them because an ally is not going to stick around afterward, and it has to get removed first. So Troy's going to sacrifice that. So now we go back to here. And, all right, so same situation. It goes away. It disappears. So now what happens is immediately you stop the removing of discs when any of the following occurs. Every participant faction has lost 1 disc, or every faction has exactly 1 or 0 discs remaining, or only a single faction remains in the area. There's only a single faction left in the area. And so then you see if there was loot. And loot is if there was... I'll have to look into the rule a little bit more, but loot basically gets you a victory point and a talent. And that is if you attack like a city or bigger. So if like Troy had lost that battle, Egypt would have gotten loot. Since Egypt only had 2 there, Troy doesn't get any loot. So that's kind of a way to describe that. So that's competition. We would do the same thing here, and let's say Egypt went first, and again, same issue. They lose a guy. You can see that went really well for Troy. They didn't lose a single thing, and Egypt lost 3 of its discs. So you can kind of set that up a little bit by paying attention to what the other player gets rid of in their growth phase and their card phase. Sometimes it's worth hanging on to cards if you think there's going to be competition, because then you can discard them instead of losing discs. But if you don't have any cards, now you might be in trouble because now you have to sacrifice discs. One other thing worth pointing out that happens is there are barbarians. They're black discs, and they come onto the game due to different events and cards that get played, and they'll come into competition. They don't have talents or cards to get rid of. They'll just sacrifice them. They'll just die, but they'll still give you some problems because let's say we had 3 barbarians here. Okay, they go first because they're less than 4, so we remove 1. Now he's got to decide, do I remove a card, remove the disc, remove a talent? This is going to cost me somehow. So let's say he removes a guy, and we just go back and forth until, there's only, in this case, it'll be 2 left for Troy. So the barbarians can really become an issue depending on, where they are in the game that's played and that sort of thing. But they are weaker than civilizations, so they're a little bit easier to destroy because they can't kind of stop themselves from getting destroyed. So that's the competition phase, and I would say arguably that's the most confusing part in the game. And I need to just check a couple rules, one on loot and one on what happens if 4 get left in there, because 3 is a city, but after that I don't know what you do. So I have to look into that. So remind me of that when we play. The last thing is the reckoning phase, and you just go through the steps. And sea domination step is that if the civilization occupies a sea area and controls all adjacent land areas, remove all opposing discs from that sea area. So this is an example right here. Egypt controls this sea area, or has this sea area, and it controls all 3 that touch it. So Sania, Nile Delta, and Libya all touch this Egyptian sea. So it's got dominance on this sea. If Troy happened to have a boat in here, these are kind of like fishermen and traders. If it happened, it would get removed. That's what happens in that sea domination step. And then you do victory tally step, which each civilization gets 1 victory for each of its cities and 1 victory point for each of its wonders in an area that the civilization occupies. So in this case down here, Egypt would get 1 for the city, 2 for the city, and then that'd be it. And then another 1 for its Great Pyramid. So it would go up to the 3 victory point track. And then Troy would do, it's up here. And at the moment, by example, I guess this is just the 1 city up there. So it would get 1 victory point. Then you do turn order reset. And what happens is you do it in order of most to least cities. So the person with the most cities goes first, and so on all the way down. If there's tied, the person with the lower victory point chooses whether they want to go first or higher than the person they're tied with. So it can be a bit of an advantage to sometimes go last, because you get to see what everyone else did in their growth phase before you go. So, but it also can be an advantage to go first, because then you might get to pick which wonder you want. And if there's 4 players, basically that second round, if everyone built a wonder, well, there's only 7 wonders. So 1 person might not get a wonder in that round. So, it's kind of worth that deciding what turn you want to be. All right, then there's the Aeneas step, and that's a bit confusing. Basically, that step exists for if you are getting dominated. If you're, let's say you're Jared and you've gotten crushed by Bill, Mikey, and me, which really probably could happen, especially if we all plan on doing it. So let's say you're getting wiped out. You can pick a different civilization, and you get to place, like, I think it's 16 discs. So like Jarrett would be like, all right, I'm going to be the Mycenae now. And you get to do that. And it's a bit of a start over to kind of keep you in the game. It's a Euro aspect of the game. And then all of the remaining yellow discs become barbarians. So it's a way to kind of keep you a little bit in the game and doing that. And that goes into effect if you have no more discs. if you have or you're down 5 victory points more than anybody else. So Jarrett's getting crushed by, if there's 3 of us out here and we're all higher than Jarrett, who's stuck at 0. He could do that Aeneas step or an Aeneas and pick a different civilization to go to. All right, then there's the sudden death step, and this is a really neat aspect. I like this a lot. So over here on the epoch track, so let's say it was turn 2. Okay, so we're going to turn 2. You see that little star there? What you do is you actually take the top card of the deck and you check its number down there, and you can't read that like an old man with cataracts, but it's a 44. So if this was like a 24 or a 42, if there was a 2 anywhere in this number, it would be sudden death, and we would be at the end of the epoch. Some great invention was made, and it started us at the next stage. On this one, when we get to turn 3, it's if there's a 2 or a 3 in the number, you go to the next epoch. And then at the end of turn 4, if that didn't happen, we go to the next epoch automatically. So that's the sudden death step. So what happens is there's a bunch of stuff at the back that I won't get into, but basically it's kind of a reset on victory points. Like you recalculate victory points again. You get rid of all the cards left in your hand. So if there's a juicy card you've been waiting for just the right opportunity to fulfill all the stuff, too bad, it's gone. You get new cards. So sometimes it's worth playing a card that fulfills some of the things it says it's going to do, just so you don't lose it on a sudden death epoch. So, and I'll let someone else figure out what the chances of that happening are. There's about 100-something cards. So if a 2's in one of them, that'd be what, 10, 20 cards, 1/5, and then maybe you have 2/5, 40% chance of that happening here. So 20% here. I think if my math is right. All right. Then what happens is then you draw 3 new cards, and you get more cards for every 4 cities in the map, and then you get 1 card for each talent you spend. Can get you another card. So talents are pretty useful and can be used for different things. So building wonders, keeping discs on the map, getting more cards, that sort of thing. So that's the game. There's a final epoch stage. And basically all hands are discarded, resolve any change of epoch table. Each civilization draws 5 cards, we advance it, and we begin the next turn. That's the game. It's actually really pretty simple. We just need to play it. So let me know if you have any questions. Sorry about the shaking camera work. I'll look up a couple more rules, loot, and what happens with those 4 up there. And I think there was one other, but that I thought of. But yeah. So anyway, guys, I hope we enjoy the game on Tuesday, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, bye.